Good morning, everyone. And thanks to ISPI for hosting this debate about the great power struggle of 2021. Thanks to everyone who is following from home. And thanks, first of all, to our guest today, Niels Annen, Minister of State at the German Federal Foreign Office. Welcome, Mr. Annen.
Good morning.
And then Manlio Di Stefano, Deputy Minister of the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation. Good morning, Mr.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning.
And Ambassador Stefano Sannino, Deputy Secretary General for Economic and Political Affairs at European External Action Services. Good morning, buongiorno.
Good morning to you.
Good morning, everybody.
So we gather here 2 weeks after the US elections. The incumbent president, I should say the outgoing president, is still refusing to concede, which is really unusual, but the world is already preparing to deal with the new administration and the new world order. European leaders rushed to congratulate Joe Biden in what some reports wrote it was an effort orchestrated also by the Chancellor Angela Merkel to show European unity and relief. And maybe Mr. Annen can tell us more about that later. The last 4 years have been signed by a lack of understanding, maybe the lowest point of transatlantic relations because of Trump's brash style, but also his lack of understanding of the historic relationship between Europe and the US. In the meanwhile, Europe has grown in some way closer to China. I think about Italy signing the Belt and Road Initiative. German economic relations are really strong with China, and Eastern European relations with China too. So Biden, we might suppose also because we know him, he's been in politics for 40 years. He has dedicated also to foreign policy much of his life as vice president, but before that also as chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee in the US Senate. So, I mean, we all know what he thinks. And it might be more demanding with Europe as far as it's concerned relationship with China. And maybe he would ask to pick more decisively sides in what is becoming the new Cold War. So my first question to all of you is what do you think about this new scenario? I'll ask you to stay in about 5 minutes so you can give us a more general answer, and then we can focus on more specific topics. If Mr. Annen would like to start, maybe?
Yeah, buongiorno, and thank you very much. I believe the question that you are asking to all of us is maybe the question that everybody is discussing right now. And although you ask about the Chancellor cooperating or coordinating with other European leaders, you know, I'm not here to talk about the internal discussions, but Germany right now holds the rotating presidency of the European Union. So I believe it is our job to try to coordinate European foreign policy and to make an effort to bring everybody together. And it's important that the message was loud and clear, not only from Europe, but also from virtually all over the world. Joe Biden will be the next president of the United States. I believe what is happening right now in the US, the unorthodox, I would say, transition period certainly is of concern, but this is an American issue. And I believe that we should and we can't trust American democracy. And I'm also explicitly want to say this as a German citizen. You know, we are looking at a democracy that has a much longer tradition than the German democracy has. So there's a lot of commentary right now, discussion, emotion, and I understand all this. But my recommendation to my own people would be to have some respect and humility also when it comes to looking at the democratic process. But what is certainly correct is the election showed how divided the country is. And everybody who is pointing to the fact that the new president will have to focus a lot, maybe most of his attention and political capital to domestic development is probably right. But I also I don't want to hide that sometimes in the last days, I had the impression that the caution in the commentary, in at least the German discussion, is maybe a little overblown. Sure, the United States changed, and Europe needs to come to grip with the new reality. It already changed under Barack Obama, and the disruptive presidency of President Trump will have a long-lasting effect. And that's what we need to work, and that what we need to accept as Europeans. We need to strengthen our own sovereignty, regardless of who is sitting in the White House. But I do expect a positive impact from a Biden administration, not because we are going to agree on every issue. By the way, we have never agreed on every issue, even before Mr. Trump. There has always been tension. We are different countries, we have different interests. But I believe the predictability, the fact that the president-elect knows the major European leaders, that he has an understanding for the necessity in times where democracies are under pressure, that the value of working together, the value of an alliance is increasingly important, that we may be underestimating the opportunities that arise with that new administration. So we cannot rely on American decisions when it comes to multilateral questions like COVID-19, the climate crisis, etc. But we should seize the opportunity and do both, invest heavily and even more in that crucial US-European relationship, which remains so important. And it's important also to explain that to our citizens. It's not about the relationship between Angela Merkel and Donald Trump. It's about the strategic relationship between our continents and countries. And at the same time, learn the lesson from the difficult last years and to invest in our own capabilities. I believe that that's important. And as you asked me to remain broadly within 5 minutes, I think it's difficult to address the issue of China in just 1 minute, but it's one example of where the West could be much more efficient in terms of defending our own policies, but also in defending our core values when we coordinate our policies towards China in a better and in a more intense way. And the irony has been over the last 4 years that in the core questions, concern about human rights violations and the authoritarianism, the neglect of international law and some of the territorial conflicts, we basically agree. But we don't agree on the rhetoric, on the measures that has been sometimes taken. And I believe we have an interest to avoid a kind of new Cold War. As the European Union always said, China is a partner, competitor, but also strategic rival. And to have the West as the political entity back on the world stage with the US-European coordination also on China could be a huge opportunity, and we shouldn't miss that opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll get back to China, of course, so it won't be only 1 minute. Ambassador Sannino, to you.
Thank you very much. I can agree on most of the things that Ms. Annen was saying concerning the new scenario with the US administration. I think that and on this we need to be frank, there has been a polarization in the international relations, polarization also within the American society, but this has generated a problem in terms of what we used to do and how we used to work in terms of international relations based on multilateralism, based on rules. And this has been replaced by a much more transactional approach. This is creating divisions between and tensions between the European Union and the United States. This does not mean that, as Minister was saying, we see things eye to eye on everything, but certainly there is a sense of communality that has been put in question in this last few years. And I think that this is also one of the reasons why, and I came to the point that also the Minister was making concerning the strategic autonomy and the fact that the European Union, even let's say with a different administration that will work more cooperatively with the European Union, will need to build this partnership, which is the most important partnership that the European Union has in the world, but it needs to build this partnership on in terms of equality, in terms of capacity also to contribute to the stability of the world. On China, it is true that the relationship and the polarization of the relationship between US and China has been very strong in these last few years, and has characterized, I would say, almost the whole spectrum of the international relations. Certainly, it's been one of the most complicated issues that we had to deal with. And it is true that China is a complex partner. The Minister was recalling the definition of China as a partner, as a competitor, and as a rival. And it is the three things at a time, and we need to take this into account. And this is also the reason why we have launched just a few weeks ago a dialogue between the European Union and the United States on China, exactly to try to frame this relationship and the complexity of this relationship in a more constructive manner. I do not think that there will be a major change in the relationship between US and China. Maybe the tonality will be different, but certainly the competition between the two superpowers will mark the foreign policy for the years to come. And in all that, we need to define our policy, and then I go back to what I was saying before concerning the strategic autonomy and the definition of our interests. We need to define our position vis-à-vis United States, vis-à-vis China, and more in general, in order to be sure that we can promote our interests, and while. And I always say, I mean, we have to make a difference between the two. The United States remains our most relevant strategic partners, while we are defining China as our strategic rival. So there is a big difference. It is not equidistance between the two, but I also concur with what the Minister was saying. We do not need a Cold War, and we don't need to be squeezed between the big two blocks. And from that point of view, and I will finish with this, we need to define much better our interests to understand which are our vulnerabilities, and work on that in order to make it sure that in a global competition we can face, let's say, the other main actors from a position of force and not from a position of weakness.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. And Minister Di Stefano.
Buongiorno, guten Tag, Rannen. Good morning, everyone. Well, we should go back in years to define what's going on in the international relations, and especially this big change that happened in the U.S. society during the last years that has determined as a result this incredible changes in the political stances, and also in this tough moment we are living right now with this uncertainty in the U.S. Political situation. But in any way, as I stated several times, the U.S. is going to be an irreplaceable partner and ally for Italy. I mean, we are cooperating since decades in all the international agenda, and we really share a connection that is fundamental for us and also for the United States. And I think that this cooperation between European Union and Italy in particular and the United States is fundamental also to promote the international stability. As I was saying, we should really go deeper in this argument, but this positioning of the United States in the last years has determined some kind of instability in the rest of the world. So in this situation, I think that the role of Europe is fundamental. In the same kind of approach that we have had with China in the last year, given that your question was a little bit bridging the two topics. I think that EU should really maintain a united approach. And that's why I'm so happy that this dialogue has, developed in the last months also between me and Vice Minister Annen, because I think that the relation between Italy and Germany is fundamental in the EU. I think we should foster a renewed dialogue between the US and the EU, because we need the US to be engaged on the global challenges. And surely we have to expand the areas of mutual interest, and in this way also we need to offer a new positive narrative. I will give you some few examples. We have to revitalize the annual EU-US summit. That I'm sure it could be a very positive development in the relations. And we have noticed how much the difference was between the European approach to COVID and the US approach to COVID in the last year. And this is another topic where we could really restart from somewhere, meaning that we would really welcome a renewed strong engagement of the United States in the global and multilateral response efforts. As European Union, we have strongly and proactively sustained the World Health Organization, because we really need to push on the so-called access to COVID-19 tools accelerator. And I think that engaging again the US in this topic would be really a positive contribute to such effort. But the most important thing, and that's obviously a statement made by my political belief, I think that the climate action it's a fundamental topic. We really welcome, at least in words, we will see in politics, the new proactive climate approach by the United States. I was positively impressed by one of the first statements made by President Biden, saying that the United States will have come back into the Paris agreements. The EU has already proven leadership on this subject, and this has also been demonstrated in the engagement with China on the same issue. And so that's why I think that if the new United States will be again engaged in the climate orientation, this is going to be a real game changer in terms of international negotiations. We like-minded countries, we need to really have a strong position when it comes to the international negotiations with other countries that, for some reason, I mean, it's understandable. They are, pretending to ignore some specific topic like climate that for us is fundamental. We are gonna have the presidency of the G20. We will be a key actor for the COP26. We will have the co-presidency with the United Kingdom. So we are really working hard with the new administration. We will work hard with the new administration in order to deliver these ambitious results in the climate negotiation. And then it comes to we arrive to the economic transatlantic relations. We deem essential to pursue the path of dialogue with the United States in order to avoid any further escalation and, undesirable political tension. We really have went through terrible times on that, because it's true that the real fight was between the United States and China, but the European economy is made on export in general. So we have had a terrible impact also on our economics agenda. So we believe the Commission should reach out to the new administration and take any initiative to build a renewed relationship, which should include a positive trade agenda. And so I think that engaging with the US will be fundamental on this. Another topic is the relaunch and strengthening of the multilateral trading system, and its pivotal organization is WTO. We always said since the very beginning that this organization has to be revitalized through changing some policy, and also, renewing it in terms of understanding of the 21st century international trade. This is something that was already in the air in the past. President Trump has pushed a lot on WTO. We don't share, as you know, this tough way of acting, but we share the final result that has to be to renew the agency. Finally, there is the security topic. We really look at the recent developments in the Balkans, for example, and in the Mediterranean, as a real. I mean, they give us a clear understanding of how much the U.S. commitment in the wide Euro-Atlantic region is a key element to reduce tensions. The EU, I think, is now on the situation that has to really restart working closely with Washington in order to establish a more cooperative relationship. On these scenarios, for sure, we as the Italian government, we look at Libya, for example, where the United States has always been fundamental or Syria, or the whole North African countries, the MENA region. But the same is when it comes to China, for example. So I think that on all these topics, the EU, and as obviously, given that I talk also about Italy, have to really reset the whole international agenda and really focus on fixing some gap that was left over in the last years.
Thanks a lot. I would like to go back to Minister Annen and also to still talk about China. The summit with China was supposed to be one of the flagship initiatives of the German presidency, and because of the COVID, of course, it was then an all virtual summit and maybe less consequential than it was hoped for. But my question is, you said in a parliamentary debate that China should be a strategic partner, but it's been more difficult since she came to power to deal with it as a strategic partner. And also Germany has always been very proactive on human rights, has been a safe haven for dissidents, from the artist Ai Weiwei to the Hong Kong Congressman Nathan Law. On the other hand, Germany is the biggest Chinese partner. The Germany economy is very entangled with China, and also the recovery in 2008 and 2009 was mostly driven by China demand. So I think Germany is a good example, and the question is, how do you balance the Germany and European economic interests with human rights issues, because we are also a community of values?
Yeah, thank you very much. Great question. And I indeed believe that the German policy towards China has embodied in a way what we agreed upon on language and strategy in the European Union. And we do see China as a partner. And I want to make that point in the very beginning because it's sometimes a little bit overlooked. The Chinese economic development has benefited the German economy, and we do have interests there. I believe it's necessary to point also to the fact that, sure, we are trying to make a modest contribution to bring European leaders together and to strengthen a European position. And I'm very grateful. It's not only great to see my colleague Di Stefano again, although only via video link, but also I believe on what you just said showed that Germany and Italy really share the core approach to this. And that has an impact on the European Union. But I believe, Minister, you also would say that there are also Italian interests as there are German interests, and we need to bring them together. So the German automobile industry, there's no doubt about it, is heavily depending on the Chinese market. And you know, we don't want to cut the economic ties with China. I am also a member of parliament. I'm representing the city of Hamburg, Germany's biggest port. We have important business with China, and that business is in mutual interest. We sometimes tend a little bit to forget what enormous amount of work and effort that not only, I mean, I'm not talking about the Communist Party here. I'm talking about ordinary Chinese people lifting what is probably more than 500 million people out of extreme poverty. So Chinese expect some respect for that enormous effort, and we should be more acknowledging the development. But China is also a competitor, and also a competitor for European and German businesses. And you know, I'm listening to Chinese leaders still using the rhetoric of a third world narrative. And there are parts of China that are certainly lacking behind, but China is not really a developing country anymore. So that means we need to talk on eye level about questions of access to markets. We are wide open, and that has been our philosophy all the way long. And in balance, Germany has benefited from being an open economy, but that very concept is under threat. It's not only because there are unfair business practices, and that's why we're addressing the investment aspect with the Chinese, and we wanted to discuss that in Leipzig at the summit that you mentioned. But it's also under threat because our most important friend and ally, the United States, is not only using instruments like additional trade barriers and custom, etc., towards China, but also towards the European Union. And there's a long-term development that I believe should be a priority also for the Commission and also for us as member states to address this with the new US administration. And that's a tendency for what we call decoupling. in the field also of high tech and technology. Are there concerns because of security related issues? Certainly, there's a very vivid debate about Huawei and 5G, and we are addressing security concerns in Germany, as I believe is the case also in Italy and other European countries. But it's not in our interest to create separated political and economic spheres. That would increase costs, that would increase the danger of a global polarization and maybe also a kind of new Cold War. So we need to talk with the Chinese, but also with our Western allies, especially the United States, about what is the right way. And then there is the aspect of strategic rivalry. And unfortunately, and you made a reference to something I said in the German parliament, we cannot turn a blind eye on the very fact that probably no leader since Mao Zedong has been so powerful like President Xi. And we are seeing a new rhetoric, and not only rhetoric, but a new policy. The times of biding your time, never take the lead kind of approach of Deng Xiaoping is definitely over. And that has global consequences. That's really changing the dynamics in the region, and it's clearly having a global impact. So the idea of having the EU-China summit was to use also some of the access that Germany has. We have also a reflection in Germany about Germany's China policy. Have we always been thinking sufficiently in European terms over the past years? Probably not. We have government consultation every year. We see Chinese top leaders almost at least once a year, and often more frequently. Not every smaller European country has the same ability. So we need to create more European unity, and that would also ask something from Germany, and we are prepared to do that. I don't want to hide the fact that there's also concerns about the initiatives like 17+1. So there's an inner European aspect of what we need to achieve. But there's also the message towards China that count with Europe as a more united player also in the region. But also count with Europe if you want to cooperate. I believe it's a missed, it's unfortunately not possible to have that kind of meetings physically right now, but we will continue working also with our European partners, and Italy is a key partner in that discussion. So that's why I'm very happy to be able to address the discussion here. And I couldn't agree more on what the minister said about the WTO. That applies, I believe, to other multilateral institutions as well. And we should, by best practice in a way, show the world and also our Chinese partners that working within international institutions is the right way to do it. And we need to be stronger. We need to be very clear also in addressing human rights, for example, but also the sometimes very unique interpretation of international law. Let me put it in a diplomatic way. And we need to work stronger together as democracies in a time where we are observing that the Chinese are also using international bodies to implement their specific language to strengthen their interpretation of multilateralism, which is not always comparable with our idea of how the UN should work. So I believe that's maybe the biggest question for the decade to come. But we should look at all three aspects and not forget that China also remains a partner, and we need to also recognize that when we now touch ground with the new administration. So a big topic, and I believe also a field of successful cooperation for Germany and Italy within the European Union.
Thanks a lot. Vice Minister Di Stefano, I would like to stay on the human rights issues with you. In the past, some of your comments about Hong Kong rose some controversy. They sounded like you were, not justifying Beijing, but saying that they have some reason for the national security law, for example. So last week we have seen 4 Democratic congressmen ousted and then the whole delegation withdrawing from the parliament. Don't you think it's time for Italy and for Europe to be tougher on the Hong Kong dossier?
Well, first of all, let me tell you that my comments were never giving an excuse to the China administration for what was going on in Hong Kong. And actually, when I visited Hong Kong, it was really during that very tough moments, I said very clearly, being there in Hong Kong, that the first achievement to reach was to avoid any kind of violence and escalation during the protests, and it was referred obviously to the both sides, some kind of violent demonstration, and especially the reaction by police and the government in general. But I'm very, very proud to have always been compliant to the UN and European position. I think that when we talk about respecting the international laws, we are also talking about respecting the idea of not interfering with political agendas or events. This is not referred to the human rights, obviously. And that's why I really took the 2 different ways. When in my experience, now it's quite around 3 years being in this role in the government, I don't remember any Italian government member meeting with the Chinese authority, whatever it is, without starting from 2 topics: the human rights and the level playing field when it comes to economy. This has always been our first topic, because we think that this is fundamental, because Italy firmly believes in the role of promoting human rights all around the world, and also the level playing field when it comes to economy. But nonetheless, China is obviously a key partner for Italy, for Germany, as Minister Hannan has perfectly said, and for the European Union, because even if we think that China doesn't exist, it is still there, one of the biggest power in the world, one of the biggest population in the world. So I think that we have to engage to keep China closer in the development toward the European values. We are, with China, in any way, we are addressing global challenges. We're starting from the economic recovery to the search and distribution of a vaccine for the COVID-19, the fight against climate change, because if we don't bring on the same arguments China, we will never fix this issue. And more broadly, in the implementation of the 2030 agenda for sustainable development. So our collaboration with China is, obviously, it has systemic differences, and obviously it's a different way of understanding the government of a country. Notwithstanding, we should, I think, continue promoting our dialogue, including the sensitive issues that we have touched before that are fundamental. So we welcome the decision taken by the leaders on 14 of September this year to restart the EU-China dialogue on human rights. This is a proactive way on tackling the issue. To effectively advance its strategic interests toward China, I think that the European Union should maintain a united and cohesive approach, all the while defending the international rules-based order and the global economic system. I mean, we always state very clearly that China has to be engaged in a proactive agenda, but obviously we understand the issues and the problems that could be, coming together with this engagement. So we have to really work, as Minister Annan was saying very clearly, within the World Trade Organization when it comes to the economic side, and into the UN and the other international institutions when it comes to human rights. I think that this way of thinking could foster the dimension of the cooperation with China. We have to obviously always seek for rebalance the role of the European Union toward China in any of that topics we have mentioned. When it comes to transparency, reciprocity, sustainability, and therefore I think that that's the only way. I mean, no European country alone is strong enough to deal with China. The same comes with the US. And that's why I really think that the European Union has a specific role on that. So we gave the same message to the EU leaders also during the virtual meeting with President Xi Jinping that was held last September, because we really believe that the European approach to China should be balanced and multidimensional. And this is the only way to, have a result and be, promoters of a multilateral agenda, always firmly rooted in the Atlantic Alliance. We really have the role to bridge the two blocks in some way. I'm sure that we are not back in the dark times of the Cold War, but still the two blocks are the two biggest economic blocks. So we need to bridge them. So with this aim, the China, the EU-US dialogue also mechanism on China is another useful opportunity for coordination. And I think that the EU-China and the EU-US on China mechanism could really be a key changer on that.
Thank you. Ambassador Sannino, if China is a systemic rival, is it possible to have a systemic European approach to it? Because, of course, every country has different needs, and it's very and now we've been very pragmatic and flexible, but maybe something more is needed, don't you think?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I mean. There are certainly different sensitivities within European Union when we approach China. I think that the three elements, partner, competitor, rival, have been repeated several times in this context, because when at the time the High Representative, together with the Commission, issued the communication which were shaping up the new relationship between EU and China, we wanted to capture these different dimensions. And I think that we need to, I would say, to be able to understand that the three of them need to go alongside together. I often say that what we need to do with China is to have an adult relationship, in the sense to understand which are the things that we can do together and which are the things that see us on different sides of the spectrum. When it comes to being rival. We say this because we have different set of values. You were speaking about human rights before. I mean, there is no doubt that on this point we are rival because we see things in a completely different way. The same is true when we think about the multilateral system and UN. We do not agree with the selective approach that China is having with the multilateral organizations and with UN in general. So there are these are elements on which we are profoundly divided. I mean, we are liberal democracies, China is not. So I mean, in a way, we have two different models. And the other point, which is also important, and that I think that we have, let's say, sorry, and on this point, we need to continue the dialogue, but knowing which are the limits of this dialogue, exactly because we are coming from different points of view. And then when it comes to the competition, I think that has been said, and we have spoken already about the level playing field, and this is the real bottom line on which now the European institutions are working since quite some time in order to come to an agreement on the investment, on how and the mechanism on which the investment can take place. But we need also to remember another initiative that has been taken at European level on the screening on foreign direct investments in order to be sure that they are not, let's say, coming in a way that is disrupting the security of our systems. And all the discussion about the 5G is certainly very much present in this. And I mean, if you remember that a few years ago, we were ready to grant market economy status to China, and now we are discussing in a completely different setup, you may understand that there has been a substantial shift in the way we are dealing with China. And I think that this is, how to say, not to make it a sort of permanent adversary or rival, but on the contrary, because we need to understand that we are not always playing with the same rules when it comes to support to our enterprises, to aid, to competition, to environmental rules, to social rules, and so on. All this said, I mean, we need to stay engaged in dialogue with China. Economically, it has been said, it's certainly a very relevant partner, very important in certain sectors, and we need to keep on working with them. We need to engage them in the redefinition of the multilateral bodies. I'm thinking about the UN. I mean, we have spoken about both WHO and WTO, and certainly these are two bodies that we need to look very carefully at. I think that President von der Leyen, in her speech on the State of the Union, was saying that we need to work by design and not by destruction, in the sense that we need to reform them from inside, but not to challenge the role that they have played up until now. And that's also the approach that we are trying to have. And then on global challenges, I think it is also important to work with them. I mean, climate change is certainly the area which is coming to the fore. The decision that it has been taken by China to reduce the net emissions by 2060 is going in the right direction. Now we need to see this declaration and this commitment transformed into concrete acts and become reality. But there are, again, a number of areas where we can work with them. But we need to harmoniously develop these three pillars, and we have always to keep in mind that China is doing exactly the same. While it's working cooperatively with us on a number of things, on the other hand, is continuously, let's say, being a sort of threat to us in a number of areas. Look at the disinformation, cybersecurity, and so on. So we need to be very alert, and we need to be, and I repeat it, all in the way we have this relationship and we develop this relationship with China.
Thank you. I think we have only time for a last round of questions, so I'll ask you also to give slightly shorter answer. So can now I want to go back to the US and Europe. Also, not to be squeezed, as someone of you said, between China and the United States. During the Trump presidency, mostly French President Emmanuel Macron pushed for strategic autonomy on defense, on building our own corporate giants. And yesterday, in an interview with the Le Grand Continent that we published also on Corriere della Sera, he said that he's worried that maybe this new administration, the fact that we as Europeans have again an ally in Washington, would slow down this push for a strategic autonomy. So I'd like to ask all of you what you think about that.
Can I buongiorno again. Look, I saw the interview, fascinating, and everybody knows how close we are working together, not only with our Italian friends, but the German-Franco relationship in the history of the European Union always had a special significance. If we have no agreement, we get sometimes criticized that is like a lack of leadership. If there is too much agreement, I also know that not always everybody is happy. But I believe that relationship has been beneficial for the European Union in general, but it doesn't mean that we always agree on every detail. And I'm not a diplomat, but I should weight my words carefully. But sometimes we see some of the old goalist thinking still somehow existing a little bit in the French narrative. So we are not talking about autonomy because it suggests that we are completely, depending on the United States. I don't believe that this is the case, but we need to be more sovereign in our approach, and we need more instruments, for example, to protect us and our companies from the threat of extraterritorial sanctions. And that's probably not going to go away, that threat, with the Biden administration. And I also believe that President Macron can be relieved in a way. The Trump administration, I mentioned that in the very beginning, was so disruptive and really changed American politics, I believe, and I'm afraid, with a long-lasting effect, that at least in Berlin, I can only speak for us here, we are more than aware of the fact that there's no guarantee that maybe in 4 years another political constellation could confront us. Mr. Trump got 70 million votes. So the idea of Trumpism is not going to go anywhere. It's there to stay, and we need to recognize that. So we are prepared to do both, to use the next 4 years to work with President-elect Biden and then President Biden. But we will not reduce our efforts for more sovereign Europe. And I am very confident that we will make progress together with our French friends. And what I'm hearing from my friend, Minister Di Stefano, is that there is a lot of agreement on this, also in the German-Italian cooperation. So I try to be short. That is my answer. Thank you very much.
Yeah, short but very clear. Thank you. Ambassador Sannino, would you like to go next?
Well, I think that we need to be clear about the substance more than the label, because otherwise we are lost a little bit with in this discussion. I think it is important to say that when we speak about strategic autonomy, this does not mean strategic sovereignty, however we want to call it. This is not means decoupling from the United States in terms of security and of providing security to the world. But I think that we are all aware, and I think that Minister Anand was saying quite clearly and explicitly, we are all aware that we need to be able to be more, to take the destiny in our hands, I mean, and to be able to act independently when we need to act independently. We will always seek to go for multilateral solution, for agreed solution. But if there are moments where we need to go unilaterally, we will need to go unilaterally. And I think that this is important to say it. For me, the concept of, again, strategic autonomy sovereignty really goes very much beyond defense, or maybe it's even more other areas than defense. Let me just say a few areas where I think we have already gone quite far in terms of defining our autonomy. In the definition, for example, of the standards for data protection is one of those. The fact that we are now issuing, for example, bonds euro-denominated directly from the Commission, and this last emission has been a resounding success, and it is, I would say, starting to be sold also in the United States. And we can continue from that point of view. And we need to, I would say, to see which are the missing links from that point of view. Minister was referring to secondary sanctions, for example, and it is certainly one of the areas where we should think hard what to do. And I think that we should not shy away, as we are not shying away, for example, in the trade sectors. In the trade sectors, we are a superpower, and we are, I don't know, I'm not saying retaliated, but if there are practices which are not fair, we are, let's say, imposing duties in order to compensate these unfair practices. So we need to be assertive in the way we defend our interests. And I think, and this is really my final point, I think that at the end of the day, the partnership with the United States will be much stronger and much more balanced if we are acting as a responsible superpower as we are. We are a superpower in terms of setting norms, in terms of soft power, but we have to be able to, let's say, broaden a little bit this definition, being able also to come in other areas. Again, this is not against the others, but it's just in terms of protecting our interest without becoming protectionists.
Thank you. Vice Minister Di Stefano, to you.
Thank you. Well, I'll be very, very direct on that. I think that the 2020 really marks, a separation line between what the European Union was and what it is and it has to be in the future. I think that for the first time under the Trump administration, the European Union most powerful country, Germany first, really understood that we have to be, as President Macron, I think rightly said, strategically autonomous. Obviously, I mean, Italy has on the United States the first commercial trade partner in general. So this will stay. But the reality is that we cannot depend on the, on the changes that foreign countries are living to be, healthy and prosperous. We need to be, we need to be self-independent on that direction. And I think that the only way is throughout a European cohesion stronger than ever. I think that Germany, as being the superpower in the EU, has the responsibility also to be the leader on that, to understand that the European Union has to be their own, sphere of interest, the first one, and that if everyone in the European Union grow, the European Union is more able in the future to, enlarge the shoulders and be strong between the two blocks we were debating just a few minutes before. And so what I mean, when I was in Germany 3 weeks ago, talking with other ministries also, we defined clearly that the economic development of the European Union has to be founded on specific pillars that are the next generation EU, the sustainability, the strategical cohesion between Italy, Germany, and France, and so on. My only fear is that having back the friendly United States, and I'm not so sure about that, I will say, this good positive momentum will turn back to the old European Union. And I think this will be really a pity. This will be losing something that we achieved with a lot of effort. So my message is, whatever happened abroad, European Union has to keep on pushing on this direction. Social welfare, economic stability, development of all the industries that we are missing due to the fact that we thought in the past that someone else could do this job for us. If we go on this direction, I think that we will talk in the future of a European Union that is standing at the same level of China and United States. But this is the only way. So this is a message. I mean, Italy will do this. I will be very clear. Italy will stand on this direction. And I hope that the biggest countries that are around us, Germany first, and France, Spain, and all the other, will do the same. Because this really goes on the credibility of this wonderful project that we are, now trying to keep on the track.
Yeah, I also think to conclude that Europe will be forced to, because as Annen said, Trumpism is not gone, is there to stay, and maybe we will discover the kind of dynamic with Trump, Biden, like Thatcher, Blair, that she did some of the dirty work, and it didn't change some of those things. And so on tariffs and Buy American, we might still hear the same rhetoric and some of the same action, if not all. And also Europe has its own agenda also with the regulation and taxation of Amazon and Google. So for sure there will be much more cooperation, but also ground for some confrontation. So it is important that Europe stay strong and stronger. So thank you all so much for being here and for this discussion. And thanks again to ISPI for hosting it, and to everyone who's been following from home.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.